I'm Eddie Chumney of Hebraic Heritage Ministries, and we welcome you to this week's Focus Israel Report. In this week's report, we're going to be sharing with you regarding the dispute between the United States and Israel over a possible nuclear deal with Iran and the controversy over Benjamin Netanyahu speaking before the U.S. Congress against any possible agreement with Iran which allows them to become a threshold nuclear state. A recent report issued by the International Atomic Energy Agency, or the IAEA, stated that Iran is continuing to withhold key information in two areas from investigators that it stated last August that it would provide. In response, Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu found it astonishing that Iran nuclear negotiations would continue after the IAEA found that Iran was hiding military components of its nuclear program, saying, "Not only are they continuing the talks, there is an increased effort to reach a nuclear agreement in the coming days and weeks. Therefore, the coming month is critical for the nuclear talks between Iran and the major powers because a framework agreement is liable to be signed that will allow Iran to develop the nuclear capabilities that threatens Israel's existence." Netanyahu added, "While the Islamic State butchers the innocent, the Islamic Republic of Iran is relentlessly pursuing nuclear weapons with the express purpose of destroying the State of Israel." Netanyahu said that the deal being discussed between Iran and the major world powers is dangerous for Israel. Netanyahu stated that the proposed nuclear agreement being discussed between Iran and the major world powers gives Iran a green light to develop the capability to build a nuclear bomb. In doing so, the deal would allow Iran to become a nuclear threshold state. As a result, Netanyahu said that he will go to the United States next week in order to explain to the U.S. Congress, which could influence the fate of the agreement, why this agreement is dangerous for Israel, the region, and the entire world, he said. Netanyahu further explained why he intends to speak before the U.S. Congress on March the 3rd by asking the question, "Why am I going to the United States?" He answered by saying, "I'm going to the United States because, as Prime Minister of Israel, it's my obligation to do everything in my power to prevent the conclusion of a bad deal that could threaten the survival of the State of Israel. The current proposal to Iran would endanger Israel. It would enable Iran to break out to its first nuclear device within an unacceptable short time, and it would allow Iran to build an industrial capability to enrich uranium that could provide the fuel for many bombs in the coming years. A regime that openly calls for Israel's destruction would thus have finally the means to realize its genocidal aims. Now mind you, I'm not opposed to any deal with Iran. I'm opposed to a bad deal with Iran, and I believe that this is a very bad deal. I'm certainly not opposed to negotiations. On the contrary, no country has a greater interest, a greater stake in the peaceful resolution of the Iranian nuclear question than does Israel. But the current proposal will not solve the problem. It will perpetuate and aggravate the problem. It would provide a path for Iran to become a nuclear power, and therefore it's very important that I speak about this before the U.S. Congress. Second question, why am I going to the U.S. Congress? Because Israel has been offered the opportunity to make its case on this crucial issue before the world's most important parliament. Because a speech before Congress allows Israel to present its position to the elected representatives of the American people and to a worldwide audience. Because Congress has played a critical role in applying pressure to the Iranian regime, the very pressure that has brought the Ayatollahs to the negotiating table in the first place, and because Congress may very well have a say on the parameters of any final deal with Iran. That's why I'm going to Congress. I think the real question that should be asked is, how could any responsible Israeli Prime Minister refuse to speak to Congress on a matter so important to Israel's survival? How could anyone refuse an invitation to speak on a matter that could affect our very existence when such an invitation is offered? Why go now? The deadline for reaching an agreement with Iran is March the 24th. That's the date that drives this speech. Now is the time for Israel to make its case. now before it's too late? Would it be better to complain about a deal that threatens the security of Israel after it's signed? I believe it's more responsible to speak out now to try to influence the negotiations while they're still ongoing. I think the whole point of Zionism is that the Jewish people would no longer be spectators to the decision making that determines our fate. Remember, we were once powerless. We were once voiceless. We couldn't even speak on our own behalf. Well, we can and we do now. The greatest danger facing humanity is the possibility that any movement or any regime of militant Islam will arm itself with the weapons of mass destruction. Everything that we see in our region now will be pale by comparison. Everything that we see in Europe will pale by comparison. The answer to all three questions are the same. Why Congress? Why Washington? Why now? Because of the grave dangers posed by the deal that is on the table right now. I don't see this issue in partisan terms. The survival of Israel is not a partisan issue. It concerns everyone, all the supporters of Israel, from every political stripe. The fight against militant Islamic terrorism is not a partisan issue. The battle against the Islamic State, which just beheaded 21 Christians, is not a partisan issue. And the effort to prevent the Islamic Republic from building nuclear weapons, that's not a partisan issue either. I think the pursuit of nuclear weapons by Iran is the most urgent security challenge facing the world. I think the greatest danger facing humanity is the possibility that any movement or any regime of militant Islam will arm itself with the weapons of mass destruction. Everything that we see in our region now will be pale by comparison. Everything that we see in Europe will pale by comparison. When a militant Islamic regime that is rampaging through the region right now, and that's what Iran is doing, when such a regime has nuclear weapons, the whole world will be in peril. Look at what Iran is doing now without nuclear weapons. States are collapsing, and Iran is plunging forward. It's already controlling 4 capitals. It's trying to envelop Israel with 3 terrorist tentacles: Lebanon, Hezbollah, and Hamas in the Gaza Strip. And now it's trying to build with its Hezbollah proxies a 3rd front in the Golan Heights. Such a regime with nuclear weapons would be indefinitely more dangerous to everyone and not only to Israel. Now, can I guarantee that my speech in Congress will prevent a dangerous deal with Iran from being signed? Honestly, I don't know. No one knows. But I do know this. It's my sacred duty as Prime Minister of Israel to make Israel's case. On March the 3rd, I'll fulfill that duty, representing all the citizens of Israel before the 2 houses of Congress. And I will make the best case for Israel that I can, knowing that our case is just, that our case is sound, and that our case offers the best hope to resolve this issue peacefully. Israel Defense Minister Moshe Ya'alon called the details of a possible nuclear deal with Iran a great danger to the peace of the Western world and a danger to the security of the State of Israel. The Associated Press reported that several officials spoke of 6,500 centrifuges as a potential point of compromise, and that the strict controls could be in place for 10 years with a gradual lifting over 5 years. The easing could bring the number of centrifuges back up to the current 10,000. Israel officials have long contended that the final stages of uranium enrichment necessary for weapons-grade fuel can be done in small and easily concealable spaces, increasing the risk of a covert Iranian advance to full nuclear capacity. The United States admitted that they are purposely trying to keep some of the details of the nuclear negotiations away from Israel. U.S. State Department spokeswoman Jen Psaki said, "Not everything that you're hearing from the Israeli government is an accurate depiction of the talks. For that reason, classified negotiating details stay behind closed doors. Obviously, we work to protect sensitive information in the negotiations," Psaki said. Asked pointedly whether the U.S. is withholding information from inside the talks from the Israelis, she said, "That is correct." Furthermore, European officials have confirmed that the United States asked them to not provide Israel with sensitive information regarding the nuclear negotiations with Iran. One European official said that they were told by the U.S. State Department's Wendy Sherman, who is the lead American negotiator with Iran, not to disclose too much information to the Israelis because the details could be twisted to undermine a potential deal. The United States accused Israel of selective sharing of information in their public complaints over the diplomatic effort. Nevertheless, U.S. officials say that they are continuing routine and frequent contact with the Israelis. Netanyahu responded by saying, "If the emerging agreement with Iran is a good one, why hide the details of it? The Iranians, of course, know the details of any nuclear proposal, and Israel does too," he said. "So when we say that the current proposal could lead to a bad deal, a dangerous deal, we know what we're talking about. I'm open to hearing the positions and arguments of those who think differently, and I would hope that they would be open to hear the arguments of Israel as well." One Israeli official responded to the charge that Israel was given selective information by saying that we see no way that allowing Iran to have 6,000 to 700 centrifuges can be okay, irrespective of other elements in the package. The official added, "In the past, we understood from the major players that the goal of the negotiations was that Iran would be kept years away from a nuclear breakout capacity. Then," he said, "that time period was changed to more than a year. Now what we understand is that today they're talking about a year," he said. Asked how Israel could know the details of an agreement if it had not been given all the information, the official said, "We cover Iran very closely." An Israeli official added, "The details of the last round of negotiations are known in the United States, France, England, Russia, China, Germany, and Iran. It is perplexing that a decision would be made to try to keep those details a secret from Israel when Israel is threatened by Iran with annihilation and its very survival could be threatened by a bad deal." U.S. State Department spokeswoman Jen Psaki questioned Netanyahu's claim to knowing the details of the deal. "Then the fact is that he knows more than the negotiators because there is no deal yet," she said. "Obviously, if there's a deal, we'll be explaining the deal and explaining why and how it prevents Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. And if that's the case and we come to a deal, it's hard to see how anyone wouldn't see that to the benefit of the international community," she said. As a result, the fundamental differences in the Israeli and U.S. positions on Iran has led officials from both sides to indicate that the exchange of information and intelligence might not be as free as it was in the past, in order to prevent one side or the other from using the information to further its Iranian agenda. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said, "I can't state this more firmly. The policy is Iran will not get a nuclear weapon. Anyone running around right now jumping to say we don't like the deal or this or that doesn't know what the deal is. There is no deal yet. I caution people to wait and see what these negotiations produce. Since 2013, we have been testing whether or not we can achieve that goal diplomatically. I don't know yet, but it's the most effective way to solve the problem. And we will prove that over the course of these next weeks and months," Kerry said. The 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council plus Germany talks have made inroads since the joint plan of action. We've halted the progress of Iran's nuclear program. We've gained unprecedented insight into it, and we expect to know soon whether or not Iran is willing to put together an acceptable and verifiable plan," he added. Iran and the major world powers have set a March 31st deadline for a political framework nuclear agreement. Well, that's going to conclude this week's report, where we shared with you details of the ongoing dispute between the U.S. and Israel over a possible nuclear deal with Iran and the controversy surrounding Benjamin Netanyahu speaking before the U.S. Congress against any possible agreement with Iran which allows them to become a threshold nuclear state. Until we do it again, Shalom in Yeshua the Messiah. Amen.